And you're live.
Aloha, snack bar, everyone. It's the one, the only, V, the Guerrilla Economist, coming to you live. My man CJ is working on the airwaves in the background and making sure this broadcast comes out spiffy and squeaky clean. With that being said, we have none other than the man. He is the Jiminy Cricket of the entire new media movement. He is a man that brings gravitas and common sense to the entire global paradigm shift. He's a man that needs no introduction whatsoever. None other than Harley Schlanger. Harley, welcome back. I'm so excited to have you back, man. So many things going on. Every week there's so many things going on.
I have a feeling. I have a feeling we're locked into that for quite a while to come.
I think so too. So what's
The
the
world
latest,
is
Harley?
well. The world is changing dramatically, and you really have a hard time keeping up day to day, especially if you try to keep up with the mainstream media,
Yeah.
because they're the worst form of lying and propaganda I've ever seen. Except we're starting to see some cracks appear, and I think that's because Trump has stayed firm, stayed tough on the key issues. And so now we're getting things like self-exposure. The New York Times reporting that there were wiretaps. The Hill reporting that Obama destroyed NASA. The Hill, which is really a piece of garbage, insider rag, had a story today. Trump may turn the tables on Obama, and in fact, it's starting to look that way because what is Obama working on? He's supposedly, according to Valerie Jarrett, he said he's got to stay in the fight to preserve his legacy. Well, what's his legacy? Obamacare, the destruction of NASA, the murder of Gaddafi, the attempt to try and destroy Syria and Ukraine and go to war with Russia. That's not much of a legacy. And the so-called economic recovery under Obama is a fraud, as you know and your listeners know.
Right.
So there's no legacy to protect. He's there to keep the British Empire, the Anglo-American Empire, in power, in control. Whether you want to call it the Rothschild Empire, the Mossad Empire, there's an empire, and its real headquarters is the city of London. And this empire is crashing. A report just came out over the last couple of days on what's happened with all the money that Draghi's pumped into the EU, into the banks of the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
And about 90% of it remained in the banks, or the banks deposited in the European Central Bank. It did not get into the economy. I think out of $1.4 trillion, less than 160 billion made it into any kind of productive investment. And Draghi, when he sold the program to the EU, said this will be a massive infusion of liquidity into the real economy. So either he doesn't know what the real economy is, or more likely he was just lying.
Yeah.
But I can give you an insight into what's happening in Europe, because the last few weeks I've been invited to address some groups, a financial group up in Hamburg. Then Tuesday night, I spoke before a group that included the Reserve Officers Corps of the German Army and the Wirtschaftsrat, or the Economic Council, the International
Mm-hmm.
Economic Council of Frankfurt. The two of them had a joint meeting. There were 100 people there, top-level people from ex-military, from business, from industry, from the academic world. And the topic I addressed was, who's running the coup against Trump? And the meeting was tremendously exciting, a lot of discussion, people just hungry for information.
Yeah.
And, I think this tells you something. At the end, one guy said, look, thank you so much for your insights on the United States. Now, let me ask you about Germany. What the hell's wrong with Merkel? That's what's on people's minds. How do we change Germany? Now, the other thing on people's minds is, how do you do it when the media is so corrupt and so full of lies? And I think, V, you've already figured this one out. People are turning off the mainstream media. They're not going
Yeah.
to CNN for news. They're going to CNN for scandal and gossip.
Right.
Same with the New York Times, the Washington Post. These are not news agencies anymore. They used to have at least some pretense of having foreign bureaus where they would tell you what's going on. Now it's all scripted, probably from somewhere in the city of London, probably in the GCHQ of British intelligence. So
Hmm.
people are turning away from that. Now that creates the opportunity for Trump, if he stays firm and if he fights back. And his tweets last Saturday, where I really loved it when the Washington Post said Trump, with no evidence to back it up, said that he was wiretapped. What evidence do they have of Russian hacking of U.S. websites? Since when did evidence matter to the Washington Post? Then it
Right.
turns out that, in fact, Trump has more evidence of Obama running a wiretap operation than the Washington Post has of their fake news stories.
Right.
So I think this is an interesting moment, and people ought to take advantage of it to go out and tell the truth forcefully, directly, and don't hold back.
Absolutely. It's remarkable to me now. It's John Muhammad Brennan and the other guy, the
Yeah,
Clapper. I call him the Clap. Is,
yeah, he needs some penicillin.
he needs penicillin. He needs mental
Yeah,
penicillin. This guy.
I think he needs a
They're
long
running all
rest.
sorts of interference.
I think he
Say again?
needs a long rest by himself somewhere.
Oh, you're vicious, Harley. You're vicious.
Now, the other thing that's really absolutely somewhat breathtaking, if you think about it, is this meeting that took place with the Turkish chief of staff, the Russian chief of staff, Gerasimov, and General Dunford, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs. This was a two-day meeting to map out coordinated activity against ISIS and Al Qaeda in Syria and Iraq. Now, the big British fear, and from the end of the 19th century until today, was that the powers that are represented there, the United States, Russia, and Turkey, would somehow form an alliance to run the British out of the Middle East. Now, until recently, with the US, that's been the British operation in the Middle East. The Bush Jr. and Obama administration basically were functioning as operatives of British intelligence and British finance. But now you see a different a different alignment emerging, which is not just military, but it's also connected to China and the One Belt, One Road, or the Eurasian land bridge perspective. Now,
Yeah.
at the same time, these US, Turkish, and Russian military leaders are meeting. They're coordinating action to crush ISIS in Palmyra. They're talking about further operations in northern Syria, coordinating not just the deconfliction, in other words, not just talking to prevent from shooting each other's planes down, but to actually carry out a coordinated action. That's what Obama and Tony Blair and the media want to stop. They don't want that alliance. Now, then you add to that what Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, said in a meeting the other day. This is after one of his top aides met with Pence, stopped in and talked with Trump. What Wang Yi said is that, look, we're seeing much better relationships emerging with the United States. There are bumps in the road, but we're seeing a transformation of US-China relations. And he said in terms of coordination on North Korea, but also coordination on trade, investment, and infrastructure.
Mm.
Now, this is the revolution. You put the Chinese economic giant together with the sleeping giant that Trump is trying to wake up in the United States, and then bring in, if you could bring in Europe into that. And Europe is, the old days they used to call Turkey the sick man of Europe. Right now, Europe is the sick man of Europe. The economy is in a shambles. But if you would revive it on this East-West trade perspective, not with free trade agreements, but with bilateral, multilateral agreements that pick up this question of infrastructure and investment in the physical economy, you have a completely new financial system emerging. And that's what all the huffing and puffing about Trump and the Russians is about. They don't want that. That's the end for them.
Yeah. Right. Exactly correct. And all of this is coming apart drastically. I mean, isn't it amazing? It's almost as if Trump baits the media. Like he'll go out there and saying, "Oh, look what happened in Sweden," and the media, being the idiots that they are, quickly rush in where, they're like fools rushing in where angels fear to tread. They go in as if they start attacking about Sweden. The next day, the riots break out. Or the weekend.
The funniest example was Trump tweeting about Arnold Schwarzenegger and the media going nuts over that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Now, today, the deputy assistant to Trump for national security, a guy named Michael Anton, was asked, do you think all this anti-Russian stuff in the US is going to undermine Trump's attempt to improve relations with Russia? And he said, look, media pressure doesn't help in formulating Russia policy, but it's not going to stop Trump. It's going to take a little while. We've got some things to work on, but we have a plan. Now, whatever else Trump represents, there are some real principles that he seems to be following, namely this idea of no regime change wars, this idea of no confrontation with Russia, not following the directions of George Soros and his regime changers. And then, we'll see. The economy is still his weak point. He's got to go with an infrastructure plan. He's got to go with Glass-Steagall. If he does that, then you've got a situation where Wall Street will go completely crazy. You talk about the lines of coke that will be loaded in Wall Street. It's unprecedented, the potential that exists.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think also from the lines of coke to the lines, and we could also probably start seeing flying bankers again, Harley.
Well, or bankers in pinstripes and not the Brooks Brothers pinstripes, but
exactly
jumpsuits.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, but
exactly right.
I hear when I do radio and blogs in the United States, and you see the comments, and people keep saying Trump is part of the same system, you're being duped. These are people who actually are victims of their own paranoia. And I hate to say this because there are people who have actually studied things, they know some things about what you're up against, but they've concluded you can't win. And therefore, when someone comes up with a flank that's a potential winning strategy, they'll sit there going over for hours, picking it apart as to why it won't work, instead of saying, let's roll up our sleeves. And if he wants to punch the bankers in the nose, let's give him our fists. And I see this from Europe, and I look at this, and then I talk to the Europeans who are basically saying, how did Trump do this? They're in awe of what's happening in the United States.
Yeah.
And in the United States, you have the liberals and the John McCain Republicans, the Bush crowd, the deep state crowd. You have so-called progressives signing up for the CIA, basically, in terms of support for it. They don't know where to go or what to do. They're in disarray. Why? Because their system's collapsing. And on our side, we can't sit there and say, well, they're deliberately collapsing it because they have another plan. Well, some of them are trying to deliberately collapse it to blame it on Trump. We've got to make sure that what's done is a full-scale reorganization of the financial system. That's why what my organization is doing now is conducting a real educational in the Congress and elsewhere on LaRouche's 4 laws, on the idea that you start with Glass-Steagall, you go with a national credit policy, you emphasize infrastructure, but not just as miles of road or miles of rail, but as a transformation of a new economic platform on which everything is built. And then you focus in particular on the most advanced areas of science and technology, nuclear fusion, and also the space program. Today, Trump's designated EPA guy came out and said carbon dioxide is not the problem. Now, you know how many people are going to get their pantyhose in a bunch over that.
Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're winning these fights. So instead of trying to say, well, Trump has Goldman Sachs here, he's got Soros there, of course he does. These are the people who are besieging him looking for spots, and maybe Trump is putting them in positions where he thinks he can pin them down. I don't know for sure.
Right.
I'm worried about people like Mnuchin. I don't think he's a good guy. On the other hand, the overall direction is what people wanted when they voted against Hillary. Peace, potential for economic development, No more free trade agreements that benefit a small group of corporate cartels. We're starting to see these things come into place. The repeal of Dodd-Frank, the possible repeal of Obamacare. These are moves in a direction that people wanted. That's why they voted against Hillary. So instead of looking at the dark side and saying, well, Trump hasn't done everything he said he would do yet. Well, if it were my choice, maybe Trump wouldn't be the person who would be president. But he is the president. And he's got some ideas that reflect these deeper principles of self-government. So I think we really have to get behind it and make sure we're educating people as to what the real principles are behind the physical economy.
Absolutely correct, and I think it's that's what they're terrified, because the physical economy, there has to be a great deal of evidence of what they produce, of what you create, whereas the paper economy that we're currently in, it's all bubbles. It's all bubbles, and all those people.
It's bubbles, and it's not transparent in the least. The people who are buying and selling these financial instruments don't know what's in them, don't know what the real value is. They don't know how to value them. And this is where, with physical economy, you're looking at tons of steel, you're looking at miles or kilometers of road, you're looking at jobs where people are actually getting paid something. These are things which are tangible. And from that, you come up with a new measure of wealth that's not monetary, but actually physical. Are we creating a new platform for the workers of the future, for the employees and the scientists and the people who are going to create wealth in the future? This is measurable. And this is something that's not measurable from a monetary standpoint, because money, you can place a money value on anything, and if you find someone who will pay for it, like a Goldman Sachs banker, then they claim it's new wealth.
Yeah, exactly correct. Exactly correct. What do you see transpiring in the next couple of days, Harley, the next few weeks, as it looks like Trump is really gaining momentum? I mean, he recently had a whole, he was schmoozing Congress. They came over for bowling and meeting with them. It was a very lighthearted. And Congress was amazed that he didn't treat them like Obama was treating Congress, which is usually with typically a cold shoulder.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of changes, and now with Vault 7 being released, and I just thought, okay, well, Assange is just dropping information that we already knew, but it goes further than that. We had Cliff High on yesterday, and Cliff, being the computer programmer par excellence that he is, he realized, you got to understand what's happening with Vault 7. The data dumped alerted all the programmers of the world, those who are in the in the privacy business and whatnot, the methods and the methodology of how they're going about doing all this, these wiretapping and this, that, and the other. He goes, now he said, my sources said there are programs right now being developed to counter NSA snooping. So what Vault 7 did is put an end to the CIA NSA snooping, because now they can create the programs to be the countermeasure against it. It's incredible what's happening.
No, that's really important, because it even goes beyond that, because what it showed is that the CIA is able to replicate or use the coding of the people they claim are the hackers. Right. So they can do hacking and say, this is the Russians.
Right.
And so they can create false flags with their coding operations. And now this is public knowledge. This is one of the reasons I think we're going to see people backing away from this defense of Obama. I mean, look, maybe Barack Obama didn't personally go down to the FISA court and say, I demand that you tap Trump Tower. Trump may have gotten some of the details wrong, but the principle is right. Look, we see this. How were they getting the information on what Flynn was talking about? Anytime there's a discussion in the White House, within an hour, it's on the New York Times or CNN.
Correct.
Now, then the other thing that the New York Times reported, which I think is extremely important and most people missed, is that the Obama administration was passing out classified information. Now, some of that may have been low level, but passing out classified information, including to Europeans. And they were using the GCHQ, the British intelligence, when they couldn't get what they wanted through the FISA court. So these are more indications of how the deep state was deployed going back to June and July of last year.
Yeah.
Not just after the election. And, was Obama completely unaware of all of this? I doubt it. And if he was, then he should be jailed for being so incompetent.
Yep. I agree wholeheartedly. Absolutely correct. Closing statements, Harley.
Well, as you can tell, I'm quite excited by the events. And part of the reason that I get excited about it is that I see that there are things that you and I are talking about and getting out into the public that are now showing up on talk shows and people talking over the cup of coffee at lunch. We're shaping a whole new, I don't want to use the word narrative, but a whole new orientation toward reality.
Yeah.
The narrative is what the other side does to try and contain people away from reality. When people come face to face with reality, they have to then make a choice. Are they going to act for the common good? Are they going to act for the principles of our republic? Or are they going to sit back and complain that everything's not to their liking? And for those people who are skeptics out there, do the studying. Take a look at what's actually happening. Look at the whole world, the beating that this empire is taking. The fact that they may not have a single candidate in France they can run by the end of next week.
Well, did you hear about Le Pen? She's saying that she'll roll out the new franc and put it on parity.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm assuming any day now someone's going to come out and say Marine Le Pen is really a man to try and destroy. But this is the kind of thing they'll do. They'll wreck a country rather than risk the possibility of losing. And that's what they're doing in the United States right now. George Soros and Barack Obama, with their partners in the deep state, the British intelligence, and the mass media, are running a coup to destroy this country.
Right.
And that's how they function. You think they only do it in the Dominican Republic or Guatemala or the Philippines? No, they're doing it here. We have them under a spotlight now. We can defeat them. And that's what people have to get across to each other. So come to LaRouchePAC.com, look at our material, sign up, sign our petitions, sign up for the daily briefing lead that'll at least give you a sense from our organization of how we see the world day by day. And I think this is how we're going to make a difference in the next weeks. I'm not talking about 10 years, 20 years, 50 years after a crash and we dig ourselves out of the rubble. I'm talking about changes that are taking place right now.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely correct. Harley Schlanger, thank you so much for being on with us again, sir, and sharing your insights. You are a breath of fresh air, and you lend so much gravitas, weight, balance, and perspective on a very, very confusing global stage where right now, I mean, things are so fast and furious that's very easy for many people to lose focus and be disheartened to what is happening. But thank you again for lending your perspectives. I find it absolutely invaluable. With that being said, guys, again, check out Harley's work at LaRouchePAC.com. And also whenever Harley gets us articles, we also post them on roguemoney.net. And with that being said, again, thank you all for listening in, and hit the subscribe button. So when Harley's on again, and make sure you hit that notification bell. This way you are alerted to the program and you can tune in and listen in. And if you missed this broadcast, it is available immediately after this program is over. So it's up for listening. With that being said, CJ, thank you for running this broadcast and making sure that everything runs smoothly. You can take us away now, buddy.